Brian.
Dan, good to see
Happy
you.
Monday.
Happy Waymo riding Monday.
Happy Waymo Monday.
Welcome to San Francisco.
Exactly. So Brian, this year started with Doge.
Yeah.
Loads of back to the office, return to office pressure from the top down.
Yeah.
What has actually happened? It's November, 17th right now? What's actually happened thus far this year?
We've definitely seen an uptick in attendance in the office, which I think actually on net is a good thing in a couple of different ways. But it's nowhere near still what people were asking for. And I think it's the usual cast of issues and problems, which is the top-down, one-size-fits-all type of approach really doesn't make sense. Like the Doge thing is a great example of that. Like even the state of Texas did the same thing. And then the governor there, I think within 60 days, had to reverse course and say, you know, maybe me saying we had to do this everywhere all at once, every department, didn't make a lot of sense because, you know, not only do we not, it turns out, have enough office space to do it effectively, but also it's not the right answer for getting the talented people we want.
Right.
And when it comes to people like, I'm seeing this in companies too, I know you guys are also, which is, I dare you to say to a data scientist they have to be in the office 5 days a week.
Right.
These are highly mobile people that could go work elsewhere. And if you, force and insist on it with junior level people, maybe you'll get them to do it. But then that just creates this rift between the haves and the have-nots, which is also sort of unattractive.
I will say if you've got a culture where people feel super missional about it, they're wanting to be there.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I agree with you.
I think also it depends on like what promises were made when and by whom, right? I mean, OpenAI is a fantastic example. They do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in the office, and it's still pretty packed Thursdays, and God forbid, a fair amount on Fridays too. And they're just an example of a company that's sort of built up this way. All along, everybody kind of knew this is how we operate.
Yeah.
But if you said...
And missional, like people like, okay, this is ground zero, or the opening innings of a
long game and a lot of exciting
I
work.
want to be an early OpenAI.
Exactly. Then I'm going to be really dedicated and have at it. And I think it's different if you said in 2022, hey, folks can live anywhere they want to. We're a remote first company. People packed up, they moved their lives.
Yep.
And then 2 years later, you changed your mind 180 degrees. You can see why some folks might be like, no, boss, that doesn't work for me. Yeah.
And you've been helping companies for years, and some pretty large companies. I know you've kind of really dug in again this year, helping large companies, consulting companies, and those companies that then consult others as well. Yeah. Like, hasn't everybody figured this out yet?
You would think so. You would think so.
How come you still got a job? No, I'll cut that. We'll cut that. Haven't you?
Keep it in there.
Haven't people figured this out yet?
You would think so. There's this funky set of common patterns because I spend about half my time still wrestling with like how many days a week in the office is the right answer, and half my days of the week on AI adoption and why are we not getting anywhere, right? And the challenge often is that you're trying to take a policy-based approach. You're trying to say, hey, policy is going to be the answer because policy feels straightforward and simple. When the answers are almost always, on anything that we have to do at work, more complex than that. And so there's no one right answer for any given company. And once a company's past any minimum size and scale, it's almost always true too that you've got to think about like what works in different parts of the company, in different organizations. I had a defense contractor that I worked with for about a year. They were, 6 different business units, 12 different countries, making hardware, making software, supporting customers and clients in different places. And the CEO himself was the one that stood up in front of his leadership team and said, I know you guys would like me to come down with a magic number, but that's just me.
Of in-office days?
In office days, yeah. Like I know there's a bunch of you that would love me to say 3 is the number for everybody in this company. But what many of you are trying to do is make me into the bad guy.
Right.
I need you. You're the leader.
They said that from the top.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He said that.
You were trying to make me the bad guy.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny.
And what he was getting at was like, actually, this is on a lot of you in the organization. I've got myself a team of people who are leading very different businesses in very different places. I expect all of you to actually work with your teams to figure out the right answer for you. And in some parts of the business, that was 5 days a week.
How aligned do you think the average company is? You talked about, hey, you're expecting me to come from on high, you wanting me to be the bad guy. Like, when I think about a basketball team, Warriors won last night, and everybody knows their role. Yeah. Like Draymond knows, everybody knows the role is to make Curry successful. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like that is, if you play with the Warriors, like that is the game. Yeah. How aligned do you think people are with like their actual North Star of the company? Because it seems to me like quite being at an earlier stage company, we've got about 80 people.
Right.
Everyone kind of knows how to move the ball down the field.
That's right. Yeah, the bigger you get, the harder that becomes, right? Because you feel more unaligned with the overall organization's mission, if you even remember what that mission is in the first place. And you've seen this and you know this. I've seen it too, because I've been in companies that are 30 people, 100, 300, 3,000, 30,000, 300,000. The needs that you've got to drive alignment around shared purpose, but also shared goals becomes harder. The misalignments that you get around goals in the first place, because I'm in one business unit, you're in another. We both think our thing is number one.
Right.
How do we make that decision at the end of the day? It's just really hard work, and it requires leadership to lean in. There's a CEO that I talked with last year who was doing goal-based and outcomes-based measurement of people, right?
Okay.
Making the shift to every quarter, we're going to have a company-wide process by which we assess whether or not people are moving the ball forward in that part of the organization. His line to me was, that's the hardest thing I've ever done as a leader on a 50,000 person organization. It wasn't the process, it was getting the senior leadership aligned about how do we clearly articulate the most important 5 goals for this company for the next 6 months.
So it wasn't even the leading indicators of what, it was more just hey, what's the goal?
That's right. Okay. That's right. And being able to, and because it involves saying no, it involves saying which projects are we going to fund, what's not going to get funded. It involves hard conversations that I honestly do think many of those hard conversations are better off had in person with a small group. Spend a couple of days wrestling through it together to be open and honest with each other, than trying to pass a document back and forth 15 times and hope you kind of iron it out.
And Brian, your companies that you're working with predominantly across North America, but also some international locations. Are you seeing any diff in US versus overseas?
The US has got a little more hardcore on return to office this year, certainly more than the Europeans have. Surprise. US has got more hardcore on a number of different dimensions. And I think, that's just sort of a cultural zeitgeist as much as it is anything else. Why do
you think that is? Is it because there's no point picking a fight? You want to keep your head down? Or
no, I think the US has swung back towards sort of a command and control oriented. I think the pendulum, especially, I have lived in tech for 30 years now. The pendulum swung during the pandemic towards being extraordinarily employee centric. Yeah. It was also kind of there, honestly, in some silly ways. I worked at Google back in the 2010s, and honestly, you didn't need 3 meals a day to be provided to people. Maybe you did because then they would stay longer, but the nap pods, and not only that, but some of the cultural.
Oh, I heard they were your idea, Brian.
That was entirely my idea. I was there when the sushi got taken out of the micro kitchens. There was hell to pay on that one.
Now, honestly, during the pandemic, I had some friends saying, they weren't friends of friends that were saying, it's really rough. Like, I don't know when my food's going to come for lunch. I was like, yeah, because they weren't getting it. Anyway, so that's a whole other point. But the example is the pendulum.
The pendulum has swung really far. So the pendulum swung from extraordinarily employee-centric. Engineers, honestly, can do no wrong, right? We'll put up with anything that we need to, because we want to hoard talent and keep as many of them as we possibly can. And Google's where the phrase "rest invest" got invented, right? There's a couple things that happened simultaneously. The pendulum swung back because the labor market got tighter. The end of the zero interest rate phenomenon in tech, which meant that hoarding engineers for free became really expensive, right? And so you also, at the same time, I think, had a lot of senior leaders who felt like it's my turn to take some power back. Right. And telling people where to work and that I want you in the office working 5 days a week is a way of sort of displaying that power. And that's part of what's actually sat behind this, is a need for control and a need for monitoring of people.
So you're a CEO, you're a 10,000 person company, you are fighting for your place in the S&P 500.
Yeah.
What mode of work is Brian Elliott choosing?
I am almost certainly a hybrid model type of guy. Okay. I really do think that you are much better equipped as a team if you have some regular pattern for bringing people together. I think it depends on if I'm doing my own startup, at which point I'll hire people in more locations and I'll spend the money instead, bring them together once a month, minimum once a quarter. If I'm inheriting a company, I'm almost certainly going to say, hey, let's figure it out team by team, but is it 2 days a week? Is it 3 days a week? We're going to spend regular time together in the office. partly because I think that shift for a massive organization to being remote first is really hard. It just takes an amazing amount of work.
Got it. And what are the people that you are like, okay, they've nailed it? Maybe you can mention them, maybe you can't. Like, they've got it right.
Yeah, I think that the folks at Atlassian have been a role model for this for a while. Dropbox, Zillow, all of them are employee choice model, meaning they all have offices. They all have really nice offices. They find ways to get people together on a regular basis, at a minimum, sort of a quarterly cadence. Dropbox is doing more and more with like bring teams together that are working on big projects as the kickoff, the milestone reviews, and all the rest of it. See the same thing at Airbnb. See the same thing at the teams at Allstate. See the same things at one of my recent favorites, Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Like nobody would think that a Southeast Atlanta-based company known for its fantastic chicken sandwiches would be a digital first company.
There's a great gift shop at the office as well.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you think that the companies that you've mentioned, like recognizable brands, most of the companies you mentioned as well, like, okay, yeah, I would work there. How much of that do you think plays in a part where people see this as like their work is part of their expression of who they are or part of their quote unquote calling versus this is just my job?
I think it really.
Do you think that plays into like
I do think that plays a role in it. I think there's a little bit of like, does this fit with me and what I want more broadly?
Right.
I do think that there are a variety of different ways to sort of play that out in terms of like, hey, I can both be really hardcore and dedicated to my job, but also have a family, and I want to balance the two out. And I want to find a way to make one work within the other. I don't need a separation. I'm going to find a way to integrate these two things and weave them in and out over the course of the week. Just give me the flexibility to do that, and I'm going to be a lot more dedicated to you and to the work. So, as opposed to making me have a hardcore choice between the two.
And what are the horror stories this year? Like, here's like, oh my goodness.
I think
this is bad,
Doge,
and you don't need to say specifically.
Well,
but...
Doge, I already said the word out loud, but I do think the way in which they rolled it out made it abundantly clear that they wanted people to quit, but also did it in ways that were really disruptive, not only to the people themselves, like literally giving people Thursday notice that on Monday you had to report to duty at a duty station that was 300, 700 miles away from where your prior location was, right? That is fairly unconscionable in terms of how you do these things. I was actually in Idaho talking with a nurse at a hospital, and he was describing the fact that he'd worked for the VA staffing the phone lines up until Doge came in and said, you need to report into the office and not be able to do this from home.
Okay. It's
an hour and a half drive from his house. He does it for a week and a half, but he's showing up and he's working at a folding table in an open space, taking highly confidential calls with people. And he basically said, this doesn't work. You will let me do this from home, right? Because this is kind of unconscionable. And they said no, so we quit. That's the kind of example where you're like, clearly logic and mission didn't factor into it.
Let me play advocate for a second, just for fun. Like, how much do you think is that there was such a problem that they knew exactly what they were doing? They knew they had to go fast and break some things, and that has been the model at other companies that have gone under the same type of leadership takeover. It's been like, hey, I'm going to come in, we're going to cut really hard, really fast, or we're going to do, we're going to make some really seismic changes, and then we'll go back and fix some things. I appreciate though that that's not great on families that are reliant upon, my wife was telling me of a park ranger that she'd heard about that was like their 30-year career just like gone. But one could argue there was a remit from the voting public to go and make massive changes as well. So how do you,
I don't think the voting public voted on return to office, but that's a separate issue entirely, since all that showed up after the whole thing went down. If you actually looked at the data inside the federal government, which a lot of people did, including myself, you would have seen that they were actually heading the right direction, which is you actually focused more on the thing that we should have been doing in the first place there, which is, are we actually generating the outcomes that we're looking for? And if not, then why is pushing them back into an office where we're also not doing anything to measure their outcomes going to be any better than letting them work from home? And especially when you look at the number of case studies of people who were terminated or pushed out through RTO, they later tried to rehire because they figured out that was a massive mistake because they went so fast.
Yeah.
I think more damage was done than good.
Yeah. So we're in San Francisco. I live in the Valley. This is my second time in 5 days here. It feels like it's happening more and more. I'm back in the city.
Yeah.
What's happened this city this year?
The big thing that's happened in the city this year is a combination of the tech surge around AI in particular, right? A lot more companies, a lot more vibe. But the other one that's happened alongside that has been programming. So social, cultural, food programming has gone through the roof in the past year and a half, and it's really starting to take hold. Our good friend Nick Bloom actually happens to have some data on this one that he was sharing the other day, showing that a lot of the San Francisco downtown return, like the core downtown return, is actually due to moving away from thinking of it as a singular purpose destination, meaning I go there to work, to thinking about it as I can go there to work, but I can also stay and do the every Thursday night event that happens south of Market. I can go and have a dinner. I can go out and check out the arts. Gen Z wants to be in the office a couple days a week. They're less likely to want to be fully remote, and they're less likely to want to be fully in office than any other generation. They want the thing in the middle more than anybody else. And they want it for socialization with each other, right? And they want it for mentorship and learning opportunities. They're not the challenge. The challenge is how you get their bosses to show up.
Right.
But that's where you can get into really pretty straightforward, hey, look, I need the managers in this company to be in the office 2 days a week, at least, and to not jam your day full of meetings. Have time for mentorship, have time for somebody to stick their head into your spot and find time with you. Do lunch and learns with people. Spend the time with your teams. And that's a really good use of time that gets people angry.
Do you think there's anything around promotion still? Like, around, we talked about, hey, that company you mentioned earlier, they're trying to really understand leading indicators of performance quarterly, which is fantastic. And, OKRs and the way Google did this 20 years ago, really, I think led the way in lots of this. How are you seeing companies trend in that direction versus presenteeism? Because some of the latest data from Clay, for example, or Pave rather last week was, hey, you're less likely to be fired if you're next to your leaders.
Yeah, that one was interesting because it was about the fact that people in the same city.
Yeah, same city.
Because it wasn't even like office location, office, no office. It was the fact that we've now got all these distributed teams that are all over the place. And that is a real challenge for folks. The main thing that I'm seeing still is it really depends on the organization and what they do to train people and to support them. I've seen pretty consistent data that like junior salespeople do much better if they're in the office 3 days a week. Mixed bag on junior engineers. And almost zero impact on like customer service agents, right? Because it's an easily instrumented and measured type of job as opposed to one that you learn continuously on an ongoing basis.
So when there's not as much apprenticeship needed.
When there's less apprenticeship needed, it becomes a little bit easier to do.
Interesting.
And also depends a little bit on what's the skill. Like there's more ways that I've seen engineering managers be decent at pairwise programming, reviews, et cetera, when they're distance-based, because bluntly, we were doing this 20 years ago, then I've seen salespeople do it.
Got it. So what similarities are you seeing in companies around AI and how they're working, where they're working? Seems to me quite obvious there'd be like a parallel between companies that are quick to adopt AI and their agility with where they work.
Yeah, it's partly because the companies that are figuring out like how they work is the unlock for both of these things.
Right.
If that makes sense, right? It's not where, it's not use the tool. It's, we actually understand the workflows in our company. We understand where we have opportunity to take slack out of the system. We understand how to actually
literally,
maybe, hopefully not. Sorry for my old pals over there at Slack. But I'll give you an example. I was actually interviewing Brandon Samet at Zapier. They're a remote first company for years and years and years. But Brandon's now their chief people and AI transformation officer. They had a big like code red they declared in spring of 23 around AI, like, hey, we're going to have to transform and change the company. Caused a fair amount of uproar. But the thing that they actually found that they're really good at is on a sort of function by function and cross-functionally thinking through things like, hey, how does onboarding really work? What's effective onboarding look like? And if you can articulate that really clearly, And if you've done it already to articulate, like, these are the parts of onboarding that should happen in person versus this is the stuff that can happen remotely.
Right.
You've actually built up some of the skills that you need to think about, here's where AI could be really effective in helping automate steps in that process, as opposed to here's where we actually want the human beings involved in driving that, right?
But it also reminds me, we did this earlier in the summer for AI in the senior leadership team, had an offsite actually, just the senior leadership team and a few engineers, like, okay, right, what's the next level of AI adoption inside the company?
Yeah.
And the process that we went through actually reminded me that we did it ourselves internally, but it reminded me of, when you're building a new website, like your whatever it is, whether it's your company website, whether it's a charity you're helping out with, and you lay out the website and it's like, okay, what are the steps we want a visitor to go through? And then there's an argument about
which things are more important.
What's above the fold?
Yeah,
there's an argument about what's in nav 1, what's in nav 2. And it's like, well, I thought that, I don't know, X was the reason that we existed. Well, I thought that Y was, and so I was like, this feels very much like a website redesign session. And the funny thing was, we didn't actually spend a ton of time talking about AI tooling and the platform decisions we are making. We spent more time talking about our flow, and then the flow could be automated and optimized by AI.
Well, and part of that conversation, it sounds like that you had too, was like, what are the outcomes we're trying to drive?
Outcomes are trying to drive.
Right. And that's just so central to it. Like, okay, when you're doing that website redesign, you're thinking about, well, I want people to sign up to hear more about the product from us.
Yeah.
Right. Not that I want to sell them this one specific feature, but you're able to articulate, like, this is our primary goal.
Yeah.
If you can do that, then you're also able to say, hey, look, to the team that owns it, look, I don't care how you use AI and don't use AI, but I think you can use it. And here's what the metric I want you to move, right? Here's the needle we got to move in this organization. So how does AI help us move that needle?
Yeah.
It's a much better argument to be having than what percentage of our workforce is using it once a week. Like, come on.
Yeah.
That doesn't really do anything. That's just a tool.
Yep.
And you're measuring use of a tool in the same way that, in some ways, monitoring, how often somebody's in the office isn't as effective as, is that salesperson more effective in the first place?
Yeah. I love that. The point that we also, which I guess was a different unlock in the age of AI, was how much unstructured data we could turn into a feedback loop that we weren't otherwise collecting. So, we said default on recorder is in pretty much any meeting we can have it in. We made some rules around that, obviously, for all the reasons you'd want to make rules around it.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're like, okay, we can be collecting so much unstructured, well, we already are collecting so much unstructured data, but we're not getting the insights we need off of this. So how can we make this salesperson's demo better? How can we make sure this CS team member is listening to the types of words that our customers are using for how they describe their problem? And can we have an automatic loop that feeds that back into the marketing team so that updates our glossary so that we have better SEO performance? All these like unstructured, like I heard the other day, one of the amazing things that AI is doing right now is we're trying to recreate ghosts of ourselves. And what do we want these ghosts to be doing on our behalf? I quite like that.
That's a cool analogy in doing it. Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that people are capable of doing and using AI to do that they may not even think about until you give them the examples in doing it, right? Like a simple one, I was with a group of HR leaders a couple weeks back, and someone from IBM actually trotted out an example they did, which was, look, every 6 months we go through the promotion review process. And the stupid part is every HR business partner has to ask their managers for who are going to put up for promotion. Then they go back and they check to see whether or not those people have been, in their job for 18 months or more, and whether their past performance, scores have warranted it or not.
Wow.
Instead, like, why don't we reverse the process?
Yeah.
Here's what we did. We actually grabbed the data in 2 different data sets and said, this data says how long they've been in role. This data says what their performance reviews were.
Right.
Marry the 2 together, send the manager the list of people who could possibly be put up for promotion, ask them who they'd like to put up for promotion. And like half the room was like, can you give us that tool or show us how you do it?
You should build a product.
Exactly. Like, okay, because that was solving a real world problem that's like, God, this is just a pain. So it's that reducing toil thing that Debbie Lovich at BCG talks about all the time, right? It's if you can give people ways to think about toil reduction. But the other thing, that was somebody who had a builder mindset, right? It was somebody who's like, oh, wait, the outcome you're trying for is, I don't want to waste time figuring out which managers are putting people up for promotion that don't even qualify. So what's the rule set for it now? How would I build a set of tools that would actually address that issue? I'm going to tinker with it for a while. I'm going to see if the data quality is good enough or not. You're going to validate it with me. And then, a month or so later, if that's working, then we can test drive it.
Right.
But that builder mindset isn't something that everybody's got.
Are you seeing that builder mindset in a particular team, or because I'm thinking of we serve workplace leaders around the world.
Yeah.
Are you seeing that in those groups of people, or does it depend on the company?
Really depends on the person almost more than the company in some ways. So usually people think of engineers as having a builder mindset, and they often do, right? Or product managers, because they'll tinker with stuff in order to get to an outcome that they like. But you can find it in anybody who's got that sort of like, how do I lay out a system or a process so that I understand logically what the sequence looks like, given the outcome I'm trying to drive? And you see them in a lot of ops people, right? So sales ops, marketing ops, HR ops. So workplace operations people, anybody who's ever managed moves before, almost certainly knows how to lay out
space ops.
Yeah, there you go. Almost certainly knows the pain and anguish of dealing with like multiple data sources and rechanging the layout 15 times and managing the spreadsheet and all the communication stuff that comes along with it. They're also the kind of person that would sit there and go, oh man, you mean you got something here that can help me automate this? Right. That's fantastic. So you can find them in a lot of different places.
Talk to me about Flex Report, and the Flex Index. Yeah. So Q4, I guess, will come out in January.
Yeah. But
any leading indicators of what's happening so far?
Less change than most people would think. I mean, you probably have as much perspective on this as I do, but I'm seeing more stabilization these days. There are some companies that are changing and moving a little more towards in-office. There's a few that have announced sort of January type timeframes. Yeah. But a lot less than there was earlier in the year. I think
a lot less whiplash.
A lot less whiplash. I think it's a lot less. There's a lot more like centralization that's happening, by which I mean like people are kind of in this 3 days a week, seems to be the average still, almost bog standard program that most people have. The number of people moving towards 5 is sort of less and less with every month that goes by. One of the things that you and I think talked about this, for a while there, you're my buddy Dave, love to trot out, the VC who says, I'm wanting, all my startups are back in office full time. That's not true either, right? Most startups are not. Most startups are actually fairly flexible, but they're fairly flexible on a model that says, I do want people in on a regular basis. And it's honestly easier, I think, for startups because they set their rules up front, right? When you're joining a startup, if it's going to be highly remote, highly in office, somewhere in between, and you're signing up for the whole thing in order to do it. So I am seeing kind of an ongoing degree of pressure, almost no matter what your number is, on efficient and effective use of space.
Yeah, so I was going to say, what if everybody's gravitating around 3 days? What are the opportunities for alpha for your company? Is it space saving versus a competitor?
I think it's a combination of like space saving and is the space appropriate for the team and use for the team. Like I'm seeing more people that are sitting there and driving it off of, I need the metrics or I have the metrics to look at whether or not a team is utilizing the space effectively or not. And I'm going to give that team leader space that's actually effective for them and not let them dictate, I've got 100 people, I need 100 seats. Right. I think those days are behind us in most organizations.
What do you do in that instance if they got 100 seats, but they don't have 100 people?
Last 90 days, your max number of people in seats was 30. Guess what? You're getting 30 seats.
And is that being received well? Do people understand that? That's part of the trade-off?
It's not always happiness making, but it's logical, and it's hard to fight back against it because if you've been at this for 2 years and you've said 3 days a week is the answer, and your team is averaging 2, and 30 seats is what you need when you've been talking about it and haranguing people and whatever else you've been doing, then there's no point in keeping, 60 seats when 30 will actually do. Any CFO is going to look at that and go, I think I've got an opportunity here.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talked about earlier younger salespeople, more junior salespeople, often the case there. Yeah. Like we try and make sure our SDRs are in the office several times a week. Yeah. But it's fascinating. We just opened a new office in Salt Lake City last week, and one of the senior AEs was just like, man, sometimes coming in, I don't get as much done. People are chatting to me. It does feel to me like the people that know what they want to get on with and don't need as much heads up time, or perhaps are in more execution roles, still, even 3 or 4 years later, like, hey, I could have done this
more effectively at home.
Now, to be fair, that person's not in leadership.
Right.
They are not bringing on anybody else. Nobody's massively looking at them for what to do. Yeah. They're not setting a tone. per se, but they're just like, hey, I've got a quota to hit.
Yeah.
Do I need to be in?
Actually, I do know a couple of firms that actually do it that way, where they sit there and say, look, if you're a senior IC and you are in the top, couple of deciles of performance, we're not going to worry where you work, which is logical, right? At the end of the day, because you're not managing people, to your point. There's some element of you would love them to be in to mentor people.
Yeah.
And so I've seen some folks say, look, be in a day a week,
right?
Be in for sort of the major like mentorship day / training day, whatever else. But if you want to work the other days from home, we're more concerned with you hitting your number than we are your mentorship skills on an ongoing basis.
We almost built something in this space 2 years ago. I don't know if we discussed at the time. We were calling it the hybrid score. And the idea was a little bit like a FICO score or a credit score.
Yeah.
That you would say, hey, my 10X engineer that I've had for a decade, for example, that's been on the team, he can be on the moon. I don't care where he is. We're aligned. We know what's getting done. He will deliver time after time, etc.
Yeah.
There's so much trust. He's got a very high hybrid score with me. And we're like, okay, how can we get people to contribute to a hybrid score? Can we? And then we were just like, this is going to be fraught with challenges. This is going to be so hard to manage, and this might end up being toxic. But that's what we were trying, like, hey, how do I get that trust score, that FICO score?
Yeah.
When hiring, like, could you have a hybrid score on your CV? But again, like, how does that not get gamed?
Right.
So we shut it down relatively quickly. But the premise behind it, hard to institutionalize, but the premise behind it was like, there's something to that.
That's where you're usually better off saying, hey, look, I know that regular time together for a team matters. I know depending on what my talent strategy is in terms of like talent density, what my maximum and minimum should probably look like. But I'm going to hold my leaders accountable for figuring out what the right answer is on every individual on their team, because in the same way, I'm going to hold my leaders responsible for the performance of their team. Why shouldn't I give them some flexibility about how they do it?
Yeah.
I don't want random manager in my sales organization saying 5 days a week when I'm trying to be more flexible. In the same way, I don't want someone saying 0. Right. So if you want to have some flex on your more senior people, knock your socks off. That's your responsibility at the end of the day. I'm gonna hold you accountable to it.
So coming out of 2025, can't believe we're quite saying that already.
It's insane feeling.
We're driving around in a Waymo next year, end of 2026. What looking different about the way the world's working?
It's gonna be an interesting year. 2025 was certainly an interesting year. I think the 26 question mark is what happens from an AI perspective broadly. You're definitely seeing, increasing adoption in some places. You're seeing some degree of resistance. I think the question is, are people getting real utility out of it at a organization-wide level, right? I think that the OpenAI folks will do fantastically well. I think a lot of the AI capabilities built into existing tools and platforms will do well. I think San Francisco feels a little bit like we're in a bubble. I've been here before.
Yeah.
Anytime that every single billboard is proclaiming, that it's got the greatest IDE, when 99% of the humans in San Francisco couldn't tell you what an IDE is, that may be the signs that you're inside of a bubble. So if that bubble bursts, which some people are debating it will, it's gonna be interesting to see what happens over the course of that. We've gone up and down cycles. I've been here for 30 years now. So I suspect that parts of this economy will do just fine, but it's going to be at some point in the next year and a half a interesting shakeup that'll happen in the AI
a lot of
space.
Seeds being invested in the ground.
Exactly.
That's for sure.
Exactly.
And do you think that's going to continue to put pressure on the budgets of companies and employees next year?
Yeah, I mean, you can see it. The big tech budget pressure hasn't just been about pressuring engineers to produce more. It's been, workforce teams, IT teams, HR teams have been cut pretty dramatically in terms of headcount and spend. And so I think that's been a real challenge because of the AI spending, not because AI suddenly automated all the jobs in all those areas. And so my hope is that we see a little bit of a rebalancing in some of those organizations towards enablement of employees. But yeah, it's not.
Does the pendulum not just further swing towards capital, though, if there is a downturn?
If there's a downturn, you see generally in that case, you see more automation. So if you see widespread, like if we hit a recession, usually what happens in a recession is that automation increases, it accelerates, right? Because companies use the downturn to do more there. And some of those jobs never come back. So we could be in for a bit of a double whammy if the bubble bursts broadly, meaning if we have a major, like NASDAQ has a drop, the economy takes a header, then you'll see more automation, which can cause more job loss. That's not a friendly place to be.
And
how's that for a very rosy 2026?
Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holiday.
Everybody. Yeah, my hope is that expectations of what a product does for you just keeps on rising and rising and rising, and that should improve quality of life, etc. I'm talking to Nick Bloom a couple of weeks ago. He's talking about how some of the countries and governments he's speaking with in the Far East are they're like wondering about more remote work from home days because they're actually concerned about fertility. And there's some data that shows there's an extra, I think it's a third more children are born in countries where there's a 30% increase in a child being born if you have more remote from work from home culture. And I think that's where I'm bullish on it as well. It's like, hey, if the younger generation is going to be supporting larger cohorts of older generations in retirement, that we just don't have the numbers to do it. Like, surely there's going to need to be a lot of extra support for productivity to even keep up the current MO.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about growth potential, not just cost reduction potential.
That's what I'm excited about. There's so many companies here, and perhaps this is just, as you said earlier, but there's so many AI companies hiring a lot of bodies right now.
Yes, there are.
On the theme of efficiency, it's where it sounds like you're going around next year. Hey, there's been a lot of investment in this year, a lot of cable laid, H100s deployed. There's a lot to be proven, a lot of yield that's expected off the back of that. It's just so interesting how, I'm going to take it back to workplace again. The most expensive, one of the metrics we have is the cost per desk for our customers. So up until April this year, the most expensive cost per desk across a global real estate we'd seen with a global law firm was about $15,000 a desk. So $15,000 a desk, that's your leasing costs, your insurance, your Diet Coke, your cereal bars, lighting, etc. $15,000 a year.
Not bad.
We spoke with one company, right? It's quite nice. Premium space, gorgeous spaces as well. $40,000 is what I heard 2 weeks ago. $40,000 a desk a year. This particular company doesn't need to be saving money that we were talking to, but it's going to be fascinating how, even being a venture-backed company, growth at all costs was very much not in vogue even just 2 years ago, 18 months ago. And now for many companies, it's all just top line again. It's going to be interesting to see, what, again, that you talked about pendulum swinging between capital and labor. It feels again like, okay, will we go back to much more of a pragmatic way of doing business again?
The $40,000 one is definitely the far end of the spectrum these days. I'm seeing a lot more in whether it's big tech or any other firm where it's also about cost containment and cost control, broadly speaking. So I think there's still the tech companies definitely want growth on the top end. But let's put it this way, if you're publicly traded, you're also looking for your earnings. And everybody's going to be paying a lot of attention to what your earnings look like and profitability. Absolutely as much, or if not more than your.
But I thought if you're JP Morgan and you want to have a big trophy office.
Absolutely. And that makes sense for JP Morgan because they're big on commercial real estate in the first place, and they're big on being the best and the biggest and the boldest. There's a little bit of this to me that's also like Amazon did the HQ2, but they also did the screw-in desks, the desks that are the hollow core doors from the original days, which they eventually, by the way, stopped having employees put together and started outsourcing the actual construction of those things. But it's always been about we're going to live frugally, we're going to live within our means, we're going to be a lean, mean operating machine, and so they can be highly successful and play that. Different companies have different cultures and are going to play those out in different ways in terms of what they provide and don't provide to employees and how they treat people. Like the $40,000 a year example is obviously an extreme. I'm not seeing that often where people like OpenAI definitely is tricking out, their offices and their spaces. There definitely are some of we've had a ton of money thrown at us from an AI perspective, companies. But I'm seeing more broadly in the economy, most people being like much more careful about what they're spending.
It's interesting. I'm seeing even within the same office complex, there being particular floors that are premium spaces, and then more general Joe Blog floors. I was thinking of a company I was in Melbourne a few months ago, the most stunning rounded cornered glass meeting rooms and all just gorgeous stuff. Personal, lady that came and brought my coffee and the little type of cookies I wanted and everything. Like, it's super high end. You go up a level, it wasn't quite the same, but it was still pretty plush. And then you might go up another level. Like, okay, so I'm seeing it, different floors, different levels, different like stakeholders. Now, this was more of a customer facing floor that I was on. It's interesting as well, like the stage of companies, like, and also the type of employees that are attracted to work there as well. I'm hearing from friends or even inside of Kadence, like, actually, we love the rough and readiness about this because this is what we wanted to build. We wanted to join this mission. We wanted to be a part of it. And we're actually trying to make a bit of a statement with our own offices saying, hey, we're not having people build their own desks, but we did have my CFO with a drill out the other day putting monitors on, on brackets, being like, and he's making a statement like, this is who we are. Yeah, exactly. Treat it like it's your money. We're here. And some people are like, we're loving this. This is great. We want to be a part of it. I think as well, as our product's grown, what we've noted, and we've served a broader audience beyond space booking into the coordination of space, the reconfiguration of space, move management. What we've seen is just the sheer workloads that is being expected of workplace leaders now is just astronomical. Like several years ago, they were buying steel case furniture. They were doing leasing contracts. They were doing insurance. If they were lucky, they got to play with Zoom equipment for new meeting rooms. Whereas now they're like philosophers of their workplace. Like, they've had to transform. I think there hasn't been a role that's changed as much as the workplace leader role.
I agree.
They're having conversations with real thought leaders around, how do I even get my people to be? Because it's not about coming in. It's actually about, am I committed to the company sometimes?
This is back to the old facilities versus facilitation.
Great quote.
Is my job to make sure that I provide
All right, Waymo.
Is my job to provide like this stable environment that never changes, that is always the same? Or is my job to provide facilitation services, to provide flexible spaces, modular events, guidance to you on even how to conduct an event in the first place, like oversight data, utilization data, be a good steward of the asset, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all challenges that are they're like order of magnitude or 2 orders of magnitude different from where they were.
And very often it's a hot potato that's been given to them by management. It's like, hey, this is the general direction that I want you to go in. Go. There isn't always this is specifically what I want you to execute.
Exactly. And being asked to do things that are outside the tools they've traditionally been provided. So they need a little Kadence help.
They do.
Go get them.
Amen. Thanks, Steve.
Good seeing you.